By the time he stepped beneath the first wall of trees, he had already decided he was not coming back. The road behind him was little more than a muddy scar disappearing into rain and fog, but he never turned to look at it. Men who still wanted to live looked back. Men who still believed in tomorrow paused at the tree line, listened to the wind, checked their gear, second-guessed their choice. A place that watched. A place that remembered every soul who had entered and counted how many never came out. The German shepherd stopped at the edge before following him in. They said old trails changed in the dark. They said hunters found backpacks hanging high in branches where no man could have thrown them. They said there were places in the inner forest where birds stopped singing and compasses spun like dying insects, and grown men started crying for reasons they could not explain. The man had heard all of it from the gas station owner 20 miles back, an older woman with tired eyes and a trembling hand who had stared too long at the dog before telling him not to go in after dark. He had only nodded, paid for water and batteries, and driven on. If he had been honest, truly honest, he would have told her warning came too late by about 6 years. Then his mother died in a hospital bed he arrived too late to reach, and the last person who still looked at him like he belonged somewhere went cold before he could say goodbye. After that, the house became a shelf filled with old boots, medicine bottles, framed photos turned face down, and a silence so complete it started sounding like permission. The forest had reached him through a missing person bulletin taped crookedly to the wall of a diner restroom. He saw the bulletin and thought of endings. Thought maybe this was a place to disappear inside a cause that would make his absence sound better than what it was. A veteran enters dangerous forest to aid search. Not a man finally too empty to keep pretending. But then he walked back into the diner and overheard 2 deputies at the counter saying the official teams were done until morning because the storm had wrecked the drones, and half the trackers refused to keep pushing after the last set of prints vanished near the old ranger sector. One of them said, "If that kid's alive in there, she won't be by sunrise." The man finished his coffee without tasting it, went outside, opened the back of his truck, and clipped the dog's harness back on. He had not planned to become a rescuer again. The decision happened the way some decisions do for broken men. Not in hope. Just in motion. The dog had jumped into the truck before he even gave the command, as if he had been waiting for his handler to remember there was still one thing he knew how to do better than dying. The deeper they went, the stranger the forest became. The ground shifted from leaf rot to slick black mud, then to a carpet of roots, knotted over one another like muscle under skin. They found the first sign of the girl near a creek bed, where floodwater had cut fresh channels through the trail. A strip of yellow fabric no wider than 2 fingers fluttered from a broken branch at shoulder height. Rain had darkened it, but the color remained bright enough to look wrong against the green. Not old. The dog came back at once and stood still beside him, nose lifting to the fabric, then toward the stream, then toward the darker slope rising beyond it. "You smell her?" the man asked quietly, though he already knew the answer by the way the dog's body leaned into one direction without pulling. "Easy." The German shepherd gave one sharp exhale through his nose. Not impatient. "Mom." Something inside his chest tightened so fast it hurt. The dog turned back, ears forward, muscles lit with urgency. "Go," the man whispered. The German shepherd vanished between the trees. The man followed hard, crashing downhill through ferns and slick roots, branches whipping his face, mud splashing his legs, the voice coming again and then disappearing under thunder. He caught a trunk, boots skidding, and looked down into a narrow basin hidden below the ridge line where runoff had carved a bowl of stone, roots, and black water. The dog was already down there at the edge of a fallen tree, body braced, staring into the hollow beneath it. The little girl was wedged between exposed roots and mud, one leg trapped, raincoat torn, face streaked with dirt, tears, and blood from a cut over her eyebrow. Children always look smaller when fear got hold of them. The moment she saw the man above, she recoiled and tried to pull back deeper, but pain shot through her, and she cried out. "Hey!" he called, forcing his voice low and steady while climbing down. "Don't move. Don't fight it." Children trusted animals before adults when terror got too close. The German Shepherd lowered himself onto his belly in the mud, head slightly down, ears relaxed forward, making himself less like a predator and more like a promise. The girl's sobbing hitched. "He found you," the man said, sliding the last few feet and dropping to one knee. "You did good." Fingernails blew at the edges. "What's your name?" She stared, breathing fast. "Mia. Mia, listen to me. I'm going to get you out, but you need to stay still while I work." The forest knew it. The dog knew it too. The German Shepherd kept lifting his head toward the ridge, then back to the child, tension increasing under his fur. "I know," the man muttered, digging harder. Mia whimpered when the route shifted. "I'm sorry," he said. Mia clung to the dog's harness with one hand until he gently pried her fingers loose. "He's coming with us," he said. "But I need both hands." She looked at the German Shepherd with naked fear. "Don't let him go." "He won't." That much, at least, he knew. He hoisted her carefully against his chest and rose. The dog suddenly wheeled left and barked twice into a tangle of hanging roots near the basin wall. The man frowned. "What is it?" The German Shepherd pawed once at the vine curtain, then forced his weight partway through and looked back. Slick, cramped, but usable. "Good boy," he said, and the words came out rougher than he expected. Then louder to Mia. "Hold on tight." They climbed. One step. He swallowed, breathing hard. "Not tonight." "You promise?" He opened his mouth, but the word caught. Promises were graves in his life. Promises were what men made before missions turned wrong and children waited at windows, and women gave up, and old mothers died alone. He had promised too many things to too many people, and watched the world tear straight through them. Then the dog came back and pressed against his leg once, as if impatient with his silence. The man looked down at the child in his arms, at her mud-smeared face and trembling lip, and finally said, "Yeah, I promise." The lie or truth of it did not matter in that moment. She needed the sound of it. Mia's hand grabbed his sleeve. "What happened?" "Quiet." His voice went flat, military, automatic. He hated how quickly that tone came back. "No sound." The dog stood over the child, silent, every muscle ready. Through the trees, one voice carried faintly over the wet dark. "Male." The man looked in the direction of the lights and felt, for the first time since stepping into the forest, something colder than death wish move through him. Whoever was out there was not searching for a lost child. They were searching for whoever found her first. It meant this forest was not as empty as the town wanted to believe. He crouched beside Mia and kept one hand on the dog's shoulder, feeling the hard muscle beneath the wet coat and the controlled vibration of readiness there. The German Shepherd had gone completely still except for the faint movement of his nose working the air. Rain had flattened strands of hair across her forehead and cheek, and mud dried in uneven streaks over the cut above her eyebrow. She nodded once, too scared to speak, then winced as she shifted her injured leg. "Good." He slipped the thermal blanket tighter around her shoulders and looked again toward the beams. 3 lights. Maybe 4. The part built in years of jungle movement, broken terrain, low light tracking, and the hard understanding that if someone dangerous had not seen you yet, that ignorance was the most valuable thing in the world. He turned his head slightly toward the dog. The German Shepherd met his eyes instantly. "Slow," the man whispered, not pointing, not gesturing. The dog understood anyway, sinking lower against the ground near Mia's side. The shelf they had reached sat between two giant root systems where the earth had broken into uneven ledges over a shallow drop. The man froze against a massive trunk slick with moss, Mia pressed against his chest, dog low at his side, all three of them listening as if sound itself might take shape. A voice came, closer now, stripped by rain and leaves but still unmistakably human. "Tracks washed out here." Another voice lower. "Then look higher." The man's jaw tightened. She bit her lip hard enough to tremble when his hand touched the ankle. "Sorry," he whispered. "It hurts." "I know." "Are they bad men?" The question came so softly it might have been meant only for the dark between them, but it struck him with the clean weight of truth children sometimes carried without realizing it. He looked back toward the lights below, then at the dog. The German shepherd had turned halfway downhill, head low, ears working, body reading a world hidden from human sight. "Yes," he said. Mia's face changed. "Soft lies got people killed in wild places. So we stay ahead of them," he said instead. "That's all that matters." She nodded, trying very hard to be brave. It broke something small and fragile in him, because he had seen that look before on children caught too early in adult danger. She looked at him, surprised. "He does that when he wants you steady," the man murmured. "Why?" "Because he knows fear makes people freeze." He paused, and despite himself, the corner of his mouth moved the smallest amount. "He doesn't like dead weight." That almost got a tiny broken smile out of her, but another voice drifted up from the slope and killed it. They had to move faster. Faded red paint still clung to the wood in thin flakes. Ranger property once. Government issue. Forgotten now. "Is that good?" Mia whispered against his shoulder. "It means we're near something built. Like a house? Maybe." The word house changed her breathing. Not much, but enough. Men that careful did not simply vanish. Either they had lost the trail, which felt unlikely, or they had spread wider, quieter, and smarter than before. The German shepherd's head snapped left. The man dropped instantly, crouching behind a root buttress as the dog moved in front of him and Mia without needing command. A second later, from somewhere off-ridge and lower than their position, came the unmistakable crack of a boot on dead wood. One man, maybe more. He could set a diversion, but that required time he did not have and hands already full with a child. Then the answer came from the dog. The German shepherd lowered his head and stared not at the approaching sound, but at a tree 20 feet ahead. Tight, but workable. The man moved now, fast and silent, half carrying Mia, half guiding himself around exposed roots until they reached the tree. He slid the child carefully into the hollow first, then crouched beside her, and pulled the dog partially in front of the opening, using his dark coat to break up the shape. Mud smeared across the man's forearms and cheek. Rain ticked off leaves overhead. The dog's lips peeled back just enough to reveal a sliver of teeth. The beam reached the fern screening the hollow and brightened as the man outside lifted it for a better angle. Then, from somewhere downslope, another voice hissed sharply. "You got something?" The beam froze. The man outside answered after half a beat. "Maybe sign. Come around east side." Not a shout. The light vanished. Footsteps retreated 2 paces, then changed direction, moving down and around the ridge. They were being flanked. The man withdrew his hand from Mia's mouth and leaned into the dog's ear. "On me," he whispered. But not a veteran, who had spent years learning how to disappear in green hell terrain, and not a German shepherd trained to read him faster than speech. He slid out of the hollow, keeping low, and motioned for Mia to stay. "No matter what, you don't leave this tree until I say your name," he whispered. Fear widened her eyes. "Don't leave me." "I'm not leaving. I'm making space." He looked at the dog. "Guard." The German Shepherd moved back into the hollow entrance at once, body angled over the child. The man circled left through dripping brush, placing each foot on root or rock where he could, avoiding leaves and branches that would crack under pressure. He moved 10 yards, then 15, then found a cluster of mossy stones above the line where the second man would come up. Instead, he held the line, keeping the man pinned and occupied exactly as training and trust demanded. "Back!" the veteran snapped. The German Shepherd released and withdrew in one fluid movement. The searcher looked up just in time to see the pistol pointed at him from 10 feet away. "Don't," the veteran said. Rain hammered the leaves. That smile lasted maybe half a second before a third beam cut through the trees behind him. The veteran pivoted, but too late to stop the voice that came out of the dark. "Drop it," someone said. "Now!" And from the way the dog's entire body tensed again, there were more than 3 men in the forest after all. "Drop it," the voice said again, and this time it came from close enough that the rain seemed to carry it straight into his ear. He did not drop the pistol. Not because he believed he could outfight an unknown number of armed men on a night ridge, with a wounded child hidden behind him, and one good dog at his side. Not because he thought the old part of him had suddenly become invincible. He kept the weapon raised because lowering it would not save Mia. Men who moved through a storm forest in formation after official search operations had ended were not the kind who spared witnesses out of courtesy. He knew that with a clean certainty of instinct. The moment they understood he had found the child, the problem would stop being him. The veteran hated that immediately. "Last chance," the unseen man said. "Put it down and step away." The veteran breathed once through his nose, slow and controlled, letting the forest map itself around him. Ridge spine behind. Heavy root systems to the left. The beam exploded into white fragments, and darkness swallowed the right side of the ridge at once. In the same instant, he dropped low and moved backward, shouting a single word that was less language than instinct. "Now!" The German Shepherd launched before the echo died. The smiling searcher tried to rise, and got slammed back into the mud under 65 pounds of train momentum, and teeth aimed not to maul, but to dominate space. To the veteran's left, another shot tore bark off the tree where his head had been half a second earlier. He grabbed Mia under the arms, dragged her out of the hollow, and moved. The dog peeled off the downed man instantly at the sound of retreat, falling into position without being called, because the dog knew the mission had changed from hold to extract. They ran the ridge in darkness broken only by lightning and stray beams cutting through brush behind them. The veteran half-carried Mia now, her injured leg knocking against his thigh, her breath coming in sharp broken cries she tried to choke down. The German Shepherd ranged behind and left, then behind and right, checking pursuit lines, ears flicking back for commands that never needed to come. Somewhere overhead thunder rolled so heavily it felt less like sound than a pressure wave rolling through the trees. "Can't!" Mia gasped against his shoulder. "Can't breathe, you can," he said, forcing steadiness into his voice while his own lungs burned. "You are breathing now. Keep doing it." The dog suddenly cut across in front of him and braced. "I go first, then you do exactly what I say." "Exactly." He looked at the dog. "Watch our back." The German Shepherd spun toward the pursuit line at once, body low, tail rigid, staring into the trees like he could will them to slow. The veteran found the crossing point by feel and shadow. One fallen trunk bridged part of the washout at an angle, stripped bare, rain slick, wide enough to crawl but not stand. He looked back. Lights were closer now, voices harder to hide through the storm. "Get on my back," he told Mia. Her arms wrapped weakly around his neck. Mia's weight pulling him off center every time the trunk shifted under water impact. He moved one body length at a time, while the ravine roared under him, and the rain made every surface treacherous. The dog remained on the near bank until the veteran was halfway across, then trotted the length in a burst of perfect balance and landed on the far side before him, turning immediately to face the darkness they had left. Good dog. The veteran reached the far bank, shoved Mia upward onto the mud shelf above, and climbed after her just as a beam found the crossing behind them. There! A voice shouted. The dog lowered himself against her side immediately, offering his own heat without command. Mia's fingers dug into the fur at his neck. Stay with me, the veteran said, crouched close. He hated the sound of urgency leaking into his voice. Mia! He wanted dry shelter, a fire, clean bandaging, warm fluids, radio contact, a medevac that did not exist, and the impossible ability to reach all of it in time. Instead, he had wet forest, hostile men, one exhausted body, and a dog whose loyalty was somehow the most reliable thing in the world. He looked at the German shepherd. The dog's eyes met his, amber brown and completely clear. All right, he murmured. We keep moving. But where? Nothing at first. Then, faintly, from deeper in the forest ahead, not behind, came a sound no wilderness should have been making at this hour. A metallic creak. Once. Slow. He breathed out once, long and thin. You heard that too? He whispered. The German shepherd stood, one ear canted forward. Light because children were small, yes, but also because fatigue and cold had turned her into something the body carried more easily than the heart could bear. The dog moved out ahead, not far, threading between roots with quiet confidence. The veteran followed the sound of the creek whenever it came, using it like a beacon between storms of insects, dripping leaves, and the constant dull pulse of distant thunder. The forest changed once more as they moved east. The tower sat on a man-made stone platform about 20 feet higher than the surrounding ground, reached by a switchback of rotted steps and one narrow final metal stair clinging to the structure's side. Nothing that said safety, but safety had stopped being the standard hours ago. He would settle for defendable. He climbed the last slope and set Mia down beneath the tower stairs. The dog ranged fast around the perimeter, sniffing, checking shadows, then returned and stood facing the tree line they had emerged from. No immediate human sat close enough to trigger stronger reaction. He looked down at Mia. She was barely speaking now. Can you climb if I help? She shook her head weakly. He hated the noise, but there was no fixing it. The dog climbed behind them with the impossible balance only dogs seem to have, weight distributed cleanly even on narrow metal. Halfway up, the wind hit harder, pushing cold rain sideways through the trees and across the exposed tower skeleton. The whole structure gave one slow complaining sway that sent an old primal dislike of heights through the veteran's already frayed nerves. Built into the wall under the old radio set. He yanked once. Nothing. Twice. It shrieked open 3 inches. They had found the tower after all. They expected him to make a move, and they were already preparing for it. The veteran lowered himself from the window slowly, careful not to silhouette his body against the weak moonlight, and turned back toward Mia and the dog. The little girl lay wrapped in a blanket in the driest corner of the cabin, one cheek pressed against the German shepherd's shoulder, her eyes open but dull with cold and exhaustion. The dog had not taken his eyes off the veteran since growling. He had read the man's face, the change in breathing, the way danger became decision before either one of them moved. For one brief second the veteran felt the old weight return, the dark whisper that had brought him into the forest in the first place, the part of him that said you came here to disappear, not to hold a tower against armed men in a storm. But that voice had grown weaker every mile since the dog found the child. Now it sounded small. Still dangerous with cold setting into the tissue, and no chance of proper evacuation yet. This is going to hurt, he said quietly. I know, she whispered, but there was almost nothing left in her voice. He cleaned the mud from her cut, wrapped the ankle as tight as he dared, then secured a makeshift splint using a broken strip from the tower desk and the bandage roll. Through all of it the dog remained pressed to her side, warm and still, except when she flinched too hard and his head came up fast, eyes hard on the veteran as if checking that this pain had purpose. "Easy," the veteran murmured to him once, and the German shepherd settled again, though the tension remained alive under the fur. When he finished, he opened the emergency fuel gel, found the old steel tray meant for warming signal coffee or soup, and coaxed a small blue-orange flame alive behind a stack of rotted Ranger manuals and collapsed shelving. He kept it low, shielded, barely enough to warm hands and air, but even that tiny heat changed the room. Mia had been watching him through half-lidded eyes. "Are they coming up?" she asked. "Yes. Can they get in?" "If I let them." He regretted how hard that sounded the moment it left his mouth, softened his tone a fraction, and crouched beside her. "Listen to me." "Good. That means we have time." He did not tell her time was relative. Did not tell her towers also became cages if the wrong people controlled the bottom. Did not tell her he was already measuring how long Rottenwood would hold under fire, how many rounds he had between the pistol and rifle, how much food the old locker contained, how long the storm might cover noise or movement, how far a man could jump from the tower platform if it came to that, and whether a child could survive the landing. Some truths belonged to adults alone. The child had wandered into something organized, something practiced, something that needed her gone badly enough to run operations in a forbidden sector during a storm. He backed away from the window and looked at Mia again with new cold clarity. "I need you to tell me something," he said. She stared at him, afraid of the intensity in his voice now more than before. "What?" "Why are they looking for you?" Her face changed instantly. "I'm asking what happened before that." Her fingers moved against the blanket, twisting the edge. The dog lifted his head and looked from her to the man and back, sensing the shift in her breathing. "I was at the campground," she whispered, "with my mom and my uncle and some other people. We were fishing but it rained and I got mad because my uncle wouldn't let me go to the river rocks by myself. I thought maybe rangers," she said. "But there weren't supposed to be trucks there." The dog nudged her hand. "I'm sorry." He almost told her none of this was her fault, but the sentence felt too small for the scale of what had happened. Instead he said, "You did what you had to do. And now I know." That changed the whole equation. The last remained for several seconds, tracing the base of the tower stairs, and then it too went dark. Mia noticed the veteran's face change. "What does that mean?" "It means they're done making it easy." He moved faster after that. He dragged the overturned desk across the cabin floor and wedged it against the door, then reinforced the latch with stripped cable from the weather station cabinet. He pulled the remaining shelves apart and stacked the thicker boards under the window lines to create low cover, not enough to stop rifle rounds fully, but enough to break direct sight and force poor angles. On the stairs, the veteran killed the little gel flame instantly with a gloved hand, and the cabin fell into near total dark. Rain hissed against the roof. Wind flexed the tower with a slow nauseating sway. He raised the binoculars and peered through the slit at the stairwell line. Then a voice rose through the rain, not loud, not panicked, controlled enough to carry. "You found the child," he said. "Good. That saves us time." The veteran did not answer. "Give us the girl and you walk out." Mia made a tiny sound behind him, more breath than voice, but enough. He reached back blindly and touched her blanket once to steady her. Then he called down, "If you wanted her alive, you wouldn't be chasing her through the dark with rifles." A beat of silence followed. The man below laughed softly, almost respectfully. That at least simplified things. "What do you want?" the veteran asked, buying time, measuring the man's cadence, his distance, the way rain distorted the voice. "You know the answer. I want to hear you say it." Another short pause. "She saw something that doesn't concern her. You, unfortunately, saw us trying to solve that problem. This doesn't have to end badly for you." The veteran glanced at the dog. The German shepherd's muzzle wrinkled once, barely, reading the tone below for what it was better than any human. "It already has," the veteran said. Movement flashed lower on the staircase edge to the right, almost invisible, if not for a single raindrop catching light. The dog barked once, explosive and furious, and lunged toward the brake until the veteran caught harness and collar together, dragging him back behind cover. "No," he snapped. "Not yet." The next burst tore through the desk and sent old paper pulp spraying across the room. The veteran rolled to the opposite window slot and returned 3 controlled shots downward, not to kill blindly, but to force heads down and disrupt angles. Cutting something? The thought came ugly and immediate. They might not need to storm the cabin at all if they could compromise the stairs or supports. He checked the central floor hatch and the cabin support layout with a glance. Too much rust to read at a distance, but the frame still held despite sway and fire. Needed eyes below in the dark where a man couldn't see and a dog could. He looked at the German shepherd and knew the dog understood before the decision was fully made. "Listen," he whispered, taking the harness in both hands. "Fast out, circle, back in." Seconds later the German shepherd reappeared through the hatch, wet, heaving, one ear nicked and bleeding slightly, eyes bright with battle focus. The veteran grabbed his collar, checked him in 2 hands, found no deep wound, and pressed his forehead once briefly to the dog's wet skull before pushing him gently back toward Mia. "Good," he whispered, and the word carried more feeling than he wanted anyone, even himself, to hear. When the next voice rose from the storm, all civility was gone from it. "You don't understand what you're standing in," the unseen leader shouted. "By dawn this whole sector will be locked and burned clean." "Fuel?" "I need you awake for a little longer," he said. She blinked up at him, lips pale but eyes clearer than before thanks to warmth and time. "What are you gonna do? Get us out before they do something worse." She looked at the dog. "Is he coming too?" The veteran followed her gaze. The German shepherd sat up, one ear bleeding, chest rising slow and powerful, staring at him as if already demanding not to be left out of whatever came next. The veteran almost smiled, a real smile this time, faint and tired and edged with disbelief that anything in him still could. "Yeah," he said. "He's the reason it might work." Outside, thunder rolled over the forest again, long and heavy, and somewhere below in the trees metal knocked softly against fuel canisters while men prepared their next move. Inside the ruined tower, the veteran knelt beside a child and a dog in the damp red-black dark and began building a desperate escape out of rust, stormwater, fire, and the one thing the men below still underestimated: how far a broken man would go once he finally had something left to save. He spread the old Ranger map flat across the warped floorboards again, pinning the corners with the pistol, the road flares, and the rusted binocular case, so the wind leaking through the cracked walls would not curl it shut. In the weak shielded light of the fuel gel flame, the faded lines looked less like guidance and more like the memory of guidance, routes drawn by people who had trusted this forest to stay the same. It had not. Years of storm damage, erosion, illegal cutting, and neglect had turned the marked terrain into a lie with a few useful bones left inside it. But bones were enough for men who understood how to build motion out of fragments. The old lookout sat on a high spine above the eastern ravine. If the tower stairs and main platform were compromised, there was one maintenance runoff chute attached to the rain collection gutter system on the east face, designed decades earlier to drain water into the external tank before everything here was abandoned. Most of the gutter was broken now, but the chute itself still clung to the tower wall, bent, rusted, and half-choked with vines, slanting down toward a slope of slick rock and fern that fed into the ravine. In daylight, it would have looked like madness. At night, in rain, with armed men below and fuel waiting under a tarp, it looked like a chance. He looked at Mia and forced himself to speak calmly, the way medics and fathers and liars all had to speak when panic would kill faster than injury. "Listen carefully. We are not staying here until morning." Her eyes widened, then drifted briefly toward the shattered window, and the darkness beyond it where voices had gone low again, too low to make out words. "Because of the fire?" He held her gaze. "Because of everything." The little girl nodded once, but there was terror under it, old now, layered under cold and exhaustion and the dawning understanding that adults did not always fix danger just by arriving. She glanced at the dog. The German shepherd had settled beside her again, but not fully relaxed, his head up, ears reading every sound below the floor, every groan of rust, and every step in the mud outside. 15 feet below the window, it detached where the brackets had failed and dropped onto the sloping rock face beneath, where rainwater had polished the stone into something dangerously slick. Past that lay a tumble of bushes, and then the upper lip of the ravine, maybe 20 yards downslope. If he could get himself, Mia, and the dog down the chute and across the rock before the men below understood what he was doing, the ravine itself might cover them from direct fire. The problem was not just a scent. The dog came to his side and peered out with him, rain dotting his muzzle. The veteran put one hand on the wet harness and felt the old comfort of contact there, something steadier than certainty. "I know," he whispered. "Bad idea." The German shepherd blinked once, but did not look away from the dark. The veteran moved quickly after that because hesitation had started to feel more dangerous than action. He anchored one end of the maintenance cable around the internal support brace nearest the east window, threading it twice through the rusted frame and finishing with a locking hitch he had not tied in years, but his hands still remembered perfectly. He tested the brace with his full body weight. It groaned but held. Then he fed the cable through the window, lowering the line toward the chute where it slapped once against wet metal and settled. "Is it scary?" she asked softly. "Yes." "Are you scared?" He should have lied. Instead, he found himself too tired for false bravery. "Yeah." Her fingers tightened in the blanket. "Then how come you're not acting scared?" That stopped him for half a second. Outside, thunder rolled and a branch struck the tower's side with a hard, wet smack. Inside, the dog shifted his weight, and the old fuel flame hissed low in its tray. "Because acting scared is not useful right now," he said. "Feeling scared is normal. Moving anyway is the part that matters." She looked at him for a long moment, then nodded as if filing the answer somewhere she would need later in life if tonight allowed her one. Because while the veterans of stupidity shouted under the tower, the quiet one, the leader, he guessed, finally used his best weapon. "Hey!" he called from somewhere out in the rain, not close this time but far enough to stay safe. "Me!" The little girl flinched so hard the blanket rustled. The veteran spun and got to her before she could answer. "Mia, sweetheart, your mom is here." The veteran felt the child's whole body jolt. Damn him. Rain washed through the silence after that sentence, thick and relentless, and the veteran could almost hear the calculation in the darkness below. Offer one impossible thing and watch discipline crack from the inside. "Mia," the voice called again, gentler now, almost patient. "Your mom told us where you ran. She's been crying for you all night." She did, trembling. "Did you hear your mom outside?" A broken pause. "No, did you hear his voice?" She nodded. "Then he's lying." The veteran did not sweeten it. "Your mom is not out there with men who chased you through the forest with rifles. Understand?" Her lips shook. "But what if, No. He said it hard enough to cut through fear. If your mom was here, she'd be calling your name until the whole forest heard. She would not be hiding behind the man's voice. Mia shut her eyes and cried silently. The dog licked once at her wrist and then turned back toward the wall, growling again. More amused. He told you not to trust me, didn't he? The veteran rose and moved to the window. I'm done talking. No, you're not. You just don't know it yet. The voice drifted slightly left through the trees, impossible to place exactly in the rain. You've got maybe one magazine and a pistol. We've got all night. Then use it. A pause. Then the soft answer. I will. The first bottle hit the tower leg 2 minutes later. Glass shattered below with a wet hollow crash, followed by the unmistakable reek of fuel cutting through rain and mold and rot. Not enough to ignite in the storm, maybe, but enough to make a point. The veteran crouched beside Mia and worked the last knots of her harness wrapped tight. We're going, he said. No noise unless you absolutely have to. The veteran went to him, placed both hands around the dog's face just once, forehead touching wet fur in the dark. Same as before, he murmured. The dog landed somewhere to their right with a thud and immediate scrambling movement. Move, the veteran barked, because pain could wait and bullets would not. He tore the cable free, grabbed for the brush line, and half climbed, half slid laterally across the rock face under the tower's east blind spot. The dog was there instantly, pushing in close against Mia's dangling leg so she wouldn't swing off balance. Another shot punched sparks from the chute remnant above. Another smacked into wet stone and whined away into the ravine. The men below had angle now, but not a clean one. Behind them, light slashed through the brush. The dog turned, snarling into the darkness. And from somewhere downstream, carried up the gorge under thunder and rain, came a new sound the veteran had not expected to hear in a dead sector of forbidden forest at this hour. Somewhere deeper in the ravine, where the black water bent out of sight and the gorge narrowed into darkness. It rose and dipped with strange rhythm, like a vehicle struggling over broken stone or a shallow draft boat grinding through fast current under too much load. For one impossible second, the veteran stood in the rain with Mia strapped to his back and the German shepherd braced at his side, and he felt the whole forest tilt in his mind. A hidden route. That was what the men had. The realization came with a second, colder truth. If the engine belonged to them, the ravine had just turned from cover into funnel. The beams behind them flashed harder through the brush as the smugglers pushed downslope, no longer worried about noise now that their prey had nowhere clean to go. The veteran dropped low and pulled them all under the hanging lip of a root shelf at the ravine edge, just as white light swept over the wet rock where they had been standing. The dog lowered so completely he seemed to vanish into mud and shadow, his amber-brown eyes the only visible part of him when lightning flashed far off behind the clouds. A voice shouted from the brush uphill. They're at the drop! Another answered from farther left. Cut downstream. Light the east path. Then the forest briefly glowed orange through the rain as someone struck a flare or chem torch behind the trees, turning the wet leaves above into flickering copper. He leaned close to the dog's ear. Downstream, he whispered. The German shepherd glanced at him once, then toward the bend where the engine noise swelled and dipped, and the veteran knew the dog had reached the same conclusion in his own animal way. The problem was Mia. I need you with me, he said quietly. Her face turned toward his, rain and tears and strands of dark hair stuck to her skin. I'm trying. I know. Twice the ledge broke and forced him to step across gaps where roots had torn free. Once a slick patch took his left foot, and he nearly pitched outward, saved only by slamming his forearm against stone while the dog rammed his thigh from below, not enough to hold him physically but enough to jolt his balance inward for one crucial fraction of a second. Good. The veteran breathed, not because the praise mattered in that exact moment, but because both of them needed the sound of something steady. The gorge bent after 20 yards, and opened just enough to reveal what the engine belonged to. A long aluminum utility skiff rode half caught in a side pocket, where floodwaters spun into a calmer eddy beneath an overhang of rock and hanging vines. He needed a path around the sentry or through him. Straight retreat was gone now. The men above had reached the upper bank and were casting lights down the ravine in widening arcs. "There!" one shouted when a beam finally caught the disturbed ledge spray upstream. The rifleman by the boat snapped his head toward the sound. At the stern, the driver shouted and turned, abandoning the tiller for his sidearm. The veteran saw the movement through water and bodies, and made the only call available. "Down!" he roared, not to the smugglers, but to Mia. Then he drove his own head into the bowman's face, and both of them crashed lower into the eddy, just as two pistol shots cracked over the water. One punched through the blanket wrap behind his shoulder. The dog released the sentry and leapt, not back to safety but straight into the moving boat, claws scrambling on aluminum, body turned toward the veteran as if demanding he do the same or be left to the ravine. The sentry, bleeding and half fallen on the rock shelf, reached for a knife at his chest rig. He had piloted enough small craft in bad places to know the rules, but rain, darkness, injury, and a child lashed to his front broke half the rules before he began. The dog crouched low near the bow, body working like ballast, claws hooked under a tie-down strap, while his head tracked every shadow ahead. "Hold!" the veteran yelled, though whether he meant it for Mia, the dog, or himself he no longer knew. The river, or what passed for a river in this storm gorge, drove them through a corridor of black stone, hanging roots, and low mist. Twice the hull scraped hard enough to jolt teeth. Once they nearly broadsided a jam of timber, and only missed because the dog barked a fraction before the veteran saw it, making him wrench the tiller and let current sling them around the obstruction instead of into it. Mia had gone frighteningly quiet against him. "Me!" he shouted over the engine and water. "You stay with me!" After a second, he felt the weak pressure of her fingers clutch once at his jacket. Good. No lights on the immediate gorge wall. No boat yet in pursuit. That did not mean they were safe. Men with hidden routes did not usually keep only one boat. It meant only that he had stolen time again, and time tonight was more valuable than ammunition. Sudden silence fell so hard it almost rang. Water still rushed all around them, but after the motor and gunfire it sounded eerily distant, like another world moving just beyond reach. The dog rose first, shaking violently, spraying the aluminum floor with rain and river water, then turned at once to Mia and pushed his muzzle under her hand until she stirred. The veteran got the blanket loose enough to see her face. She blinked slow, then nodded once. Did we win?" The question hit him with such sad innocence, he almost laughed and almost broke at the same time. "No," he said quietly. "We got away for a minute." Her eyes drifted past him to the dog. "He jumped first." "Yeah," the veteran said. "He usually does." The dog, hearing only tone and his own importance in it, rested his chin briefly on the child's knee and stared out into the reeds again, every line of him alert. The veteran searched the boat quickly. The dead or wounded smugglers had left behind exactly what men like them always believed belonged to them forever: supplies. The second hiss was static when powered, then spit a burst of clipped voices that froze him in place. East Canal, confirmed breach. Static. Girl recovered? Another burst. Negative. He took both three. He cut the volume instantly and looked at the dog. The German shepherd stared back, ears forward, posture already reading the renewed danger flowing through the man before words ever formed. Both three. Ahead, the forest closed again, Not overhead this time, but from both banks, like it was trying to pinch the channel shut and swallow both man, child, and dog whole. As they slid into it, the veteran felt the old dead part of himself finally burn away under a simpler truth. He had not entered the forbidden forest to save a child. Not the sort of thing a smuggler clipped on for style. The veteran throttled back, jaw tight, and steered the skiff alongside the floating body just long enough to snag the shoulder strap with a boat hook jammed under the seat. The current fought him instantly, trying to drag the corpse under the hull, but he braced one boot against the console and hauled until the man rolled enough for the face to turn half upward in the beam. Not local law. No county patch. Mia stirred against the bundled blankets and looked toward the drifting shape before he shifted his body to block her view. "Don't," he said quietly. "Was that a person?" "Yeah." "Are they dead?" He paused for half a second, then gave her the truth in its smallest possible form. "Yeah." The little girl said nothing after that. The silence from children was always worse than the crying. He had learned that too long ago in places men wrote reports about with clean words that never matched the smell of mud, blood, and wet clothing. The first few pages were useless on immediate reading: surveillance notes, route windows, watch rotations, inventory shorthand. Then one page in the middle hit him like a nail driven under the ribs. Subject cell using canal to move crates from station to uplink route. Local child missing, possible compromise. Additional risk, inside leak on county side. Meet point at 3 o'clock. An inside leak on the county side, which explained how the smugglers had stayed ahead of formal search patterns, and why official operations seemed to stall so neatly at the wrong moments. And most important of all, the dead operative had written, "Child missing, possible compromise," which meant Mia's existence had already been folded into the federal unit's working picture before this man ended up in the water. There had been others. He folded the notebook shut and restarted motion with more urgency than before. Mia's voice came small through the blanket. "What's a pumping station?" "An old building near the river." "Maybe shelter." Maybe is better than nothing." He softened his tone a little. "And buildings have walls." "Walls help." She nodded, though he could not tell if the answer actually comforted her or if she just wanted him to sound certain. "Acknowledge if mobile, acknowledge." Then gone. He held the radio like it might bite. Not smugglers. The cadence was wrong. Controlled, official, compressed under stress but not sloppy. He tried again after shifting the wire angle, cupping it from rain. "This is..." He almost used his name, stopped, then went with the truth that mattered. "I've got the girl." Then, faintly, so faint he almost doubted it, a reply. "Say again, girl alive?" Gunfire cracked behind them. 2 rounds whipped over the canal, low and blind through reeds, but close enough to slap the water with white plumes beside the stern. The veteran killed the utility lamp instantly and shoved the radio into his jacket. Mia cried out as the acceleration hit her injured leg and then clamped her teeth shut. "Sorry," he said without looking back. "Hold on." The dog dropped even lower in the bow, body reading impact before it came, occasionally shifting weight left or right before obstacles appeared clearly enough for the human eye. Twice his movement made the veteran alter course a fraction before submerged logs revealed themselves in the dark. Once a hanging vine wall looked like open water until the dog snapped his head right and the veteran trusted it, cutting around what turned out to be a fallen tree trunk hidden just below the surface. The child groaned when the change in position hit her leg and the veteran felt fresh guilt slice under the adrenaline, because guilt always found room no matter how full a night became. "I know," he whispered. "Almost there." He lifted her into his arms. The German shepherd jumped silently onto the ramp and moved 3 paces ahead, body low, nails clicking once on concrete before he adjusted to softer footing at the moss line. The veteran followed up the slope, pistol in one hand, child in the other arm, rifle slung and banging lightly against his back. Water dripped from every edge of the abandoned station. Pipes hummed with nothing, just the memory of machinery under rain. "I need you quiet again." She nodded, too tired now even for fear to take much shape. He handed her one of the protein bars from the boat. "Eat what you can." She tore a corner with clumsy fingers and bit because he told her to, which broke his heart in a way battle never had. A tactical poncho. Someone had used this place recently, maybe within hours. The dog moved first, angling toward the fire door. Then he stopped. His whole body locked. "Don't move unless I say your name." Her eyes went to the blood and then to him. "Are those the good guys?" "I don't know yet." The honesty made her look older for 1 second than 8 years allowed. He signaled the dog with 2 fingers, and the German shepherd came at once to the child's side. "Guard." The dog settled half in front of her, half facing the room, weight forward, ready. The veteran advanced alone toward the office. The pistol tracked him with frightening steadiness considering the wound. "Stop," she said, voice raw but controlled. Her eyes went to his face, his weapon, his posture, then past him to the shadow of the doorway where she must have heard or sensed the dog shifting near Mia. "You alone?" she asked. "No, hostile." "If I was hostile, you'd already know." Her jaw tightened. "Everybody says that." Behind him, far off outside, another engine rose at the canal. "Civilian now." "Found the girl in the forest." "Found her," the woman repeated, as if the phrase itself offended her by sounding too simple for the night they were in. "And you just happened to steal one of their boats and bring her straight here. They were already hunting us before the boat." Her eyes narrowed. "How many behind you?" "At least 4 still active." "You were running surveillance out of this station." She said nothing. "You knew about the weapons route through the gorge," he continued. "You logged the child as a compromise." "One of yours had notes." For the first time since he entered, the woman's pistol dipped maybe half an inch. "You found Keller," she said quietly. "In the canal." A long blink. Professionals mourned later if later existed. "Then you know enough." She exhaled through her nose, decision arriving in layers he could almost see. "Set your rifle down." "Slow." He did not obey immediately. "Not while that engine's outside. If I wanted you dead, the rifle wouldn't matter." "True." Then your kid wandered into a live transfer, and the whole thing accelerated. "Her name is Mia." The woman's eyes flicked past him toward the chamber, where the dog waited with the girl. A tiny shift, but enough to tell him she was still measuring the humanity of the room against the mission she'd been holding together with blood and discipline. "Mia," she said. "That's the leak in the notebook, if you read that far. Every time we moved on a route, they thinned out first. And now? Now they know we're here, they know the witness is alive, and they know my team is broken." She glanced toward the dead operative without letting the look become grief. "So now they'll stop being careful." The veteran heard movement in the main bay beyond the office. Not the dog. Mia shifting against the cabinet where he had left her, maybe trying to hear through the walls. "I've got the child and the dog out there," he said. "She's cold, exhausted, sprained ankle, head cut. Dog took a nick at the tower and went through one of your people at the canal. We're all still moving, but not by much." "You held the tower?" For the first time something like surprise entered the woman's face. "Talk," he said to the smuggler on the floor. He slammed the man's face into the concrete once, not to brutalize but to shock clarity back through arrogance. "How many?" The smuggler laughed wetly. "Enough." The veteran looked at the dog. The dog looked at the smuggler. Not because the animal was savage, but because men recognized in those eyes the complete absence of bluff. 5 outside, the smuggler said quickly. Maybe 6 if Raoul came off the north road. Explosives? A pause. The veteran leaned the rifle harder into the throat. Just a voice, a face on bad glass, and 5 dead informants. The voice outside rose again. You're bleeding out in there, Agent. He won't save you. Give me the girl and maybe I'll leave him the dog. Mia made a tiny broken sound behind the pump housing. The dog's growl dropped so low it seemed to come from the concrete itself. The veteran looked at the federal woman. Can you move? Can you carry both of us? No. Then don't ask bad questions. A rough, humorless breath almost escaped him. You first, he said to the federal woman. She stared at him like he was insane. I'm the slowest. You know the route. The logic one. The veteran caught her elbow before she went under. Don't, she hissed, pride lashing out before sense returned. Just keep moving. The intake corridor stretched ahead in a tube of sweating concrete barely wide enough for 2 people shoulder to shoulder. Thick feeder pipes ran along one side at knee height. The veteran put Mia back onto his back with quicker knots than before, and took the pencil light, while the federal woman leaned one shoulder to the wall and limped ahead just enough to navigate by memory and diagram. The dog stayed between them and the rear, turning his head constantly to check both directions, nails clicking softly on submerged concrete when the water shallowed and vanished when it deepened. Why the hell are they willing to burn this whole sector for one route? The veteran asked in a whisper once they were moving. The federal woman's answer came after 2 limping steps and 1 controlled breath. Because it isn't one route. He felt his spine tighten. Talk. There's a transfer window at the pumping station every 2 weeks for weapons, yes. But the crates are only one side of it. She glanced back, eyes hollow in the weak light. They're moving data drives too. It's feeding leverage. Quiet corruption with hard teeth behind it. Who? If I knew that, I wouldn't be in a tunnel bleeding into my boot. A grimace crossed her face as she forced the leg through another step. But enough people with enough money that a dead child and a burned forest solve more problems than they create. The intake corridor bent left and descended. Water rose to mid-calf. Still there. The dog sneezed once at the stink and then resumed scanning the rear as if he understood the stakes of every echo. Behind them, something heavy slammed the hatch. Then again. The smugglers had found the well. She pushed harder through the water, jaw clenched so tight the muscles jumped visibly under her skin. Service hatch ahead, she whispered. If it's not sealed. The corridor opened suddenly into a low chamber where the main intake feed split around a grated debris trap. A man's voice came through the crack, raw, hoarse, and close to breaking from exhaustion. Move back, he said. Doors hung on debris. The federal woman inhaled sharply. Cole? The voice answered after half a second. Depends who's asking. She leaned into the seam. Open the damn hatch, Cole. Silence. Then one breath of what might have been relief or pain. Agent Mercer? The veteran looked at her, and something essential shifted. The veteran caught the clue at once and shifted his stance, one hand on the wheel, the other bracing under the lower edge of the hatch. On 3, Mercer said. 1. He wore the same federal field gear as the dead men the veteran had already seen, but his vest hung open, one side half cut free like he had stripped it in a hurry after being hit. He could not have been older than the veteran by much, maybe early 40s, hard face ground down by fatigue and pain, but still carrying the kind of competent attention that made details stick in a room. His gaze hit the child first, then the dog, then the veteran, and finally Mercer. A quick accounting, no wasted reaction. You look awful, he said to Mercer. I was going to say the same. Then the hatch behind them thundered under a hard blow. "No more reunions." "Move," the veteran said. Cole backed into the trench at once, grabbing the edge of the broken concrete slab to clear the opening wider. Mercer limped through first because she knew the route, then Mia and the veteran, and finally the German Shepherd flowed across the threshold backward for the last step, eyes never leaving the tunnel rear until the veteran physically touched his harness and drew him through. The service hatch slammed mostly shut behind them when the displaced debris shifted, leaving only a hand-width seam and the wheel still half-turned. It would not stop the smugglers long, but it would force them to understand the passage first, and understanding stole time. 6 active we've seen. Maybe 7 if the County Leaks man is still with them, Mercer answered. At least 1 boat behind us, more may be available upstream. Cole's eyes cut to the veteran with quick evaluation. You are the civilian. Former military. Tonight you're just the civilian. It wasn't insult. It was triage language. You steal the canal boat? Yes. Good. Means they're pissed. He coughed once, grimaced, and kept moving. Dead end in high water, he muttered. Learned that the expensive way. How many of yours made it to the station? The veteran asked. 5 in total, Mercer said. Keller in the canal. And 1 county liaison who was never ours. The bitterness in the last sentence was pure steel. He fed route timings and watched rotations out of the sheriff's office and used the missing child search perimeter to keep volunteers away from the active transfer lane. Mia, strapped high against the veteran's chest now instead of his back, so he could watch her face and carry the rifle easier in the dark, stirred at the word child. So the bad men knew where everyone was looking. Mercer glanced back. In the weak pencil light her face softened by the smallest measurable amount. Go, he told the others. I'll slow them. Mercer stopped dead. Not happening. Then we all get shot in a pipe. Cole's expression hardened, but he didn't argue the logic. Jammed. The veteran passed Mia into Mercer's arms and climbed the wall, bracing boots and pipe clamps to get leverage. Together he and Cole lifted again. The grate groaned, spat rust, and rose enough for the German Shepherd to nose under. Generator housing sat gutted in the weeds. It looked like the kind of place official maps forgot and criminals remembered. Mercer hauled herself out next with a stifled groan that told the veteran the leg was approaching uselessness. Cole came last and slammed the grate down behind him just as muffled voices reached the trench below. They'll be out in under a minute, he said. The veteran took Mia back and pointed toward the road. Vehicle? Cole shook his head. Maybe once. Not now. Then where? Mercer answered before he could. Control annex on the north side. Mia buried her face against the veteran's chest. The dog flattened beside them, then lifted his head just enough to track firing lanes. Can you make the annex? The veteran asked Mercer. What's beyond East Fence? Spill Channel and Culvert Road, Mercer said. Where does it go? Back around to the annex from the other side. She understood the shape of the idea as soon as she said it. Lower profile. More cover. But if the spill channel's flooded, everything's flooded. Cole said. That ship sailed with the rest of the night. The veteran looked at the dog. Lead. The German Shepherd was already up, half crouched, staring toward the broken east gate where runoff water streamed through in silver ribbons. Good. Cole didn't leak, he said. They cleaned house. The veteran looked away from the ruined face before Mia could. The child still saw enough. Was he one of them? Mercer's answer came flat. And, built into the north wall, under a faded evacuation map, a hardline radio console powered by its own protected battery circuit. The veteran looked at it, and felt something almost unfamiliar pass through him. Hope. Not the loud dramatic kind. something smaller. Mercer saw it too and moved for the console immediately, leg nearly folding under her. Cole collapsed onto the floor beside the medical locker, with one hand clamped over the new wound in his side. The German Shepherd paced once around the room perimeter, then settled in front of Mia again, as if a reinforced door meant the child finally deserved one full breath of pause. She slid down the wall beside him, and wrapped both arms around his neck without speaking. Mercer hit the radio power, and static flooded the room. We have partial fire reports and conflicting units on the east sector. Identify immediately. Mercer still did not transmit. Instead, she looked at the veteran and asked in a voice so low it barely crossed the room, "How good are you at making people believe exactly what you want them to believe?" He almost said he had spent half his adult life inside missions built from that question. Instead, he looked at the steel door booming under a hard testing strike from outside, and then at Mia curled against the German Shepherd beneath the shelving. Her face was gray with exhaustion, eyes open but glassy, both hands buried in the dog's neck fur like she had anchored her whole life there. She sounded like local command under pressure, but still in charge. "County Tactical, this is East Maintenance Annex," she said. "Unknown hostile group active around pumping main and canal route. Child witness alive. Copy your last." The radio hissed. Then, "Authorization checks. Stand by." "Stand by?" Cole rasped from the floor, almost laughing through pain. "That's beautiful." Mercer ignored it and kept transmitting. "Listen carefully. They are preparing to burn the site. Then another." The smugglers had shifted to tools now, pipes, pry bars, something heavier than fists. They knew time had turned against them too. If County Command believed Mercer, roads would close. River exits would get marked. Then he moved to Cole. "Let me see it." Cole tried the old automatic lie. "It's fine." The veteran peeled his hand away anyway. "Not dead yet." "You stay conscious?" Cole gave him the look professionals gave each other when there was no point pretending toughness was the issue. "Long enough." "Good." The veteran packed the wound fast with coagulant gauze while Cole gritted his teeth and said nothing except one sharp involuntary sound at the worst of it. Mercer glanced once toward them, verified motion, and went back to the radio. "Yeah," he said. "I promise." The dog pressed harder against her knee like he approved the answer. Mercer cut the radio line after giving a final update and turned fully toward the room. "We've got maybe 5 minutes before outer ignition if they commit. Less if they push smoke first." The veteran pointed at the crawlspace panel. "What's behind that?" "Service conduit to storm outflow trench," she said. "Should come out near the north retaining wall if the collapsed map in my head is still right." "Can a child fit?" "Yes." "Can a dog?" Mercer looked at the German Shepherd, who stared back with the blunt seriousness of something more loyal than language. "Probably." "Barely." "Can you?" "A beat. If Cole can shove me, maybe." Cole leaned back against the wall, face white around the eyes now, but mouth still crooked with that exhausted dark humor some operatives used when pain climbed too high to admit directly. "Romantic." The veteran stood. "Then that's the route." They moved at once because once the right answer exists, delay becomes betrayal. He and Cole attacked the crawlspace bolts with pry bars while Mercer resecured her tourniquet, bandaged what she could of her leg, and grabbed every piece of evidence that could survive evacuation: the notebook, route card, Keller's ID, radio handset, one intact data pouch from the office kit she had somehow kept clipped to her vest through everything. The veteran packed the rest: water, one med pouch, flares, spare ammo, and a portable battery lamp. Mia ate the second crushed protein bar because he told her to, and because even terror could not fully erase obedience when a trusted adult's voice held steady. The dog never took his eyes off the steel door, except when the veteran touched his harness and redirected him to heel. The first smoke seeped through the vents before the bolts were fully out. Not thick yet. Just the bitter chemical warning of burning fuel and wet vegetation forced into heat. Then they would shoot the exit door in 90 seconds. Cole muttered after listening to the impacts. Maybe less if they've got the spreader from the dock. The final bolt gave. The veteran and Cole dragged the crawlspace panel free, and a throat of black air opened behind it. Cold, wet, narrow. The veteran wrapped her in the driest blanket, strapped the med pouch across her chest, and crouched at the opening. Crawl toward him, he said. You follow the dog no matter what. If you get scared, you keep moving anyway. She nodded, lip trembling. Cole shoved her feet when the leg caught. Then Cole himself ducked halfway in, stopped, and looked back at the veteran. You're last because you've got the gun, yeah? Yeah. Don't be heroic. The veteran almost smiled. Too late. Cole snorted once and dragged himself after Mercer. Now it was only the veteran and the room. Smoke thickened fast once the others were gone. Mercer and Cole were at the grate already, trying to force it outward into the storm trench beyond. It had been welded decades ago, then cut halfway through more recently, probably by smugglers using the North Trench for covert access before the station became a battlefield. Move aside, the veteran said. Into the trees. Mercer shouted over the rain. They ran the trench until concrete ended and jungle took them back. The forest beyond the pumping station was different from the main forbidden interior, not cleaner, not safer, but less myth and more raw swamp-edge survival. Enough to make shapes more dangerous because now every trunk looked almost human and every human shape could hide as landscape for one crucial second. The dog led through it like he had been born in these exact shadows. Mia could no longer walk, so the veteran carried her again despite muscles that had long since gone beyond pain into numb obedience. Mercer leaned half her weight on Cole and still kept her pistol up whenever branches shifted wrong. Behind them, the pumping station became a dull orange wound in the rain. The dog growled once, low and final. Then a man stepped out from behind the SUV with a rifle and the same voice that had called Mia from the tower in the rain. Enough, he said. He stood alone, which made him more dangerous, not less. Finished like the deputy in the spill channel once his usefulness ended. The route commander looked at Mia first, then the dog, then the veteran. You've cost me a lot, he said. The veteran shifted slightly, enough that the rifle sat more cleanly into his shoulder. You should have stopped chasing the kid. The man almost smiled. You think that was still the mission after the tower? Rain whispered through the leaves. Somewhere behind them the helicopter sounded nearer now. You should be dead. You're behind schedule. His rifle twitched a fraction toward Mercer. The dog moved before the veteran did. The German shepherd did not break from cover wildly. Then the commander coughed blood and looked up not at the veteran, not at Mercer, but at the child. You don't understand, he said, voice thinning. This was never just a rout. Mercer pushed herself up on one elbow and answered for all of them. No, it was a rot. The commander tried to say something else. Close enough that rotor wash bent the treetops and scattered rain in wild silver sheets through the clearing. Cole finally letting himself collapse against the SUV tire once he saw uniforms that did not lie in their eyes. Mia crying only when a female medic tried to separate her from the dog. The veteran saying, "He stays with her," in a voice that made the medic look once at his face and decide not to argue. They loaded the child and the dog into the same rescue carrier. They put Mercer and Cole into another. Someone asked the veteran 3 questions in a row, and he answered only half of them because the adrenaline dump had finally begun and his body had started shaking from the inside out. And maybe that mattered more. So he leaned down, touched Mia's hair back from her face, and said, "Yeah, I did." Another moment was the dog refusing the helicopter ramp until the veteran put a hand on his harness and told him, "Go with her." Only then did the German Shepherd climb inside and turn immediately to lie across the floor beside the child's stretcher like the whole aircraft was just another unstable piece of terrain he had agreed to dominate for her sake. The last moment came later. Much later. After Cole survived surgery and sent the veteran a message that contained only 3 words, "Dog's a menace." After the child's mother found him outside the hospital at dawn 2 days later and cried into his jacket in a way that left him unable to speak for a full minute. Weeks later, when the weather had turned gentler and the first clean leaves returned to the trees beyond town, he stood in the hospital rehabilitation garden with a paper cup of bad coffee in one hand and watched Mia walk carefully between painted stones with her ankle brace hidden under a sock decorated with cartoon foxes. The German Shepherd immediately leaned into his shoulder, as if to certify the answer before it was spoken. "No," he said. "I'm not leaving." Mia studied his face the way children did when they needed truth more than comfort. Then she nodded, satisfied, and held out the leash. "Then you walk him with me." The dog looked from her to him with complete shameless understanding, like this outcome had been obvious from the first step into the forbidden forest. Not the witness from the men who tried to erase her, but the man who entered the forest to die alone and, because one loyal German Shepherd found a missing child instead, walked back out with a reason to live.